Hi guys, in this video we'll be checking cards that have different effects or texts currently than what they had in H.A.T format, so July 2014. Why does this matter? Because as of me making this video, H.A.T format doesn't have its own section on Dueling Book, where basically 100% of games are being played like GOAT or Edison format do, so cards there have current text on them. This means when you have something like Bujingi Turtle in your graveyard, when playing on Dueling Book, you might think you are not allowed to use it in damage step because on the card it will say except during the damage step, which wasn't the case back in 2014. We'll be comparing every card we managed to find out that had a functional errata or was ruled differently because of a different wording. On the left, we'll always have the newest copy available for H.A.T format. On the right, the newest print available in general as of me making this video. In the middle, it'll be written what's the difference for the effect you want to apply when playing a H.A.T format game. Note that a card may get new errata in the future, so this list might get longer. Also, cards like Photon Strength Bouncer, Schoolmeister, who could activate during the damage step, or Effect Veiler and Forbidden Lance, who didn't last until the end of the turn, will not be mentioned here, because their different effects are a result of time-specific rulings and game mechanics, and not card errata itself. For each card mentioned here, we found a confirmation that it was played differently back in H.A.T format era. Please also use provided timestamps to get to the card you are interested in. Let's get to the list. So this list is alphabetically sorted. We'll start with Ancient Fairy Dragon, who received a well-known errata, partially based on Master Rule 3, allowing players to have two field spell cards simultaneously. Back then, Ancient Fairy Dragon didn't have a restriction of not being able to add a field spell with the same name, and it could, of course, only destroy one field spell. If you manage to have multiple Ancient Fairy Dragons, you could use their once per turn effects once each for every copy you had. Armored Cybern is one of 7 junior monsters who all had their effects changed in the same way. Back in H.A.T format, all union monsters had an effect that stated only one union monster at a time can be equipped to one monster. Now that isn't the case anymore, probably due to power creep. The other part that got changed, most likely for the same reason, is their restriction to unequip themselves and special summon strictly in attack position. Now you can special summon them in defense position as well if you want. Black Garden, heart and soul of Chainbeat strategies. Last print before H.A.T format had the following text. Half its attack, also you special summon one rose token, etc. Now the conjunction is then instead of also, which means you need to fulfill the first part of the effect in order to apply the second part. Let me give you a practical example. Chainbeat decks play Evilstorm Thunderbird, and when you summon him, when Black Garden is already in play, Black Garden's mandatory effect will activate. Then you could chain Evilstorm Thunderbird as Chainlink 2 to banish itself and return afterwards with its attack intact. If you do this in H.A.T format, Black Garden will still summon the Rose token even though it didn't successfully resolve halving Evilstorm Thunderbird's attack. In current format, due to then rather than also in its card text, Rose token would not get summoned. Knowing your and your opponent's deck regarding situations such as this one can be the difference between losing and winning. We already mentioned Bujingi Turtle, who also got reprinted just 3 weeks after H.A.T format ended, and they added this text stating it cannot be used during the damage step anymore. In H.A.T format, you could still use it in response to Firehand's targeting effect, for example, which was a big help for Bujin strategies. Destiny End Dragoon is not a card you'll see in actual play in H.A.T format, but still it received a not very well-known errata, similar to Treeborn Frog. In current, if your opponent has Light and Darkness Dragon, and when you activate Destiny and Dragoon's effect in graveyard to revive itself, LUD negates it, and you cannot use it once again in the same standby phase. In H.A.T format, you could. In 2014, if you had multiple copies of Dewloren Tiger King of the Ice Barrier, you could use each copy's effect once. Now you can only use his effect once per turn, no matter how many times you resummon him. In H.A.T format, Dewloren was limited in fear of his looping potential, but after nerfing him in 2017 with one of Konami's infamous errata packages, it was finally put to unlimited in March of 2021 because nobody could actually abuse his new effect in a meaningful manner anymore. Actually, Dewloren was the only non-banned card that got an effect change in that 2017 errata update. Double Spell has a very specific difference regarding text change. In 2014, you could activate and successfully resolve Double Spell even if you had 4 other cards in your spell and trap zones. In 2026, you cannot, because you have to physically put the targeted spell in your spell and trap zone. Elemental Hero Rampart Blaster was also one of those cards whose effect change Konami didn't publicly announce. Now it can attack directly using its effect while in defense position, and it doesn't need your opponent to have 0 monsters on the field. Back in H.A.T format, it could only attack directly while in defense position if your opponent had no monsters on the field. As with a lot of other cards, this was probably just a mistranslation error. Another change that actually does come up occasionally, if you set Gigant X with something like Book of Moon and it gets destroyed like this with something like Dark Hole, it still floats into a level 3 or lower Giga monster. In current, it has to be face up before it leaves the field in order to use its revival effect. Gilasaurus is sometimes played in decks such as Plant OTK. First couple of prints, Gilasaurus didn't make your opponent target what they want to revive. When they introduced problem-solving card text, they made Gilasaurus' effect target for 3 of his prints. After 2017, Gilasaurus' effect once again doesn't target. This is probably something not a lot of people noticed, but Gorz the Emissary of Darkness can now trigger off of something like Fencing Fire Ferret's graveyard effect. In retro formats such as Edison, Tengu, and H.A.T, Gorz can only trigger off of damage inflicting effect from your opponent's field, not hand, banishment, graveyard, or elsewhere. Grandmaster of the Six Samurai and the Possession Bunch. When they implemented the possession term, they changed some cards from different parts of Yu-Gi-Oh! Palette. Some of them, such as Necomania King, received their reprints before July 1st, 2014, meaning they could be played in their newly intended manner. Some, like Grandmaster of the Six Samurai, didn't receive a reprint yet, and because Konami doesn't notify us about these changes, it was played as written in its last released form. For example, if you take control of Grandmaster of the Six Samurai from its owner with something like number 11, Big Eye, and then someone uses Dark Hole, Grandmaster of the Six Samurai could still activate its graveyard effect in H.A.T format. Now it can't anymore, as it has to be destroyed in the owner's possession. Another card that was changed the same way Destiny End Dragoon was, meaning that now you can only activate Grandsoil's effect once per turn, no matter how many copies of him you summon. Back then, there were some loops you could do with his effect, in the later formats, and that's why they changed his effect. Heavy Mech support platform was changed the same way Armored Cybern was. You can now unequip and special summon him in any position. Also, multiple union monsters can be equipped to a monster at the same time. Junk Defender is an interesting one, almost no one knows about because it wasn't played in anything ever. We actually considered him for our draft when we were checking some 2014 era cards, but then we saw he had a functional errata in which he forgets the defense boost at the end of the turn. I suppose keeping said 300 defense really would make him too powerful, I suppose. At 2010's Shonen Jump Championship, Nashville Alex Mitchell piloted his so-called spaceship deck to top 16. He was playing under rules that allowed his 3 copies of Lord British Space Fighter to attack indefinitely as long as you destroyed monsters back to back. This poor wording was only changed much later, and until then, meaning in H.A.T format as well, you could attack more than once more. Machina Gearframe and Machina Peacekeeper both got the Union errata treatment, so the same goes for them, as did for Heavy Mech Support Platform and Armored Cybern. Why Konami decided to only change 7 Union monsters effects and not the other ones, we'll never know. As of now, the other 15 Union monsters of this time can still only special summon them in attack position and still restrict you to having only one Union monster equipped to one monster at a time. Mermail Abyssteus is another big one since Mermail is a relevant deck in the format. Until his reprint in 2017, you had to activate Teus's effect to add a level 4 or lower Mermail monster from your deck when summoning him via his own effect. This meant when discarding Gunde, you couldn't chain block Teus with her against something like Traptrix, Traphole Nightmare, for example. In 2017, he joined his 2 brothers, Abyss Megalo and Abyss Lead, who were both optional since their release. Minefieldriller is another of the possession bunch. Now it must be in your possession when it gets removed from the field to add the field spell from graveyard to your hand. Mist Valley Apex Avian was the boss of ninja decks and was also later played in some pendulum strategies as well. Until 2018, you could use his effect multiple times in one chain, and each time target the same Mist Valley card, such as itself, to negate the effect it was chained to. Now you can still technically target the same card in multiple chains, as it doesn't return it for cost, but you also wouldn't be negating anything because it's a end if you do conjunction. For exactly 2 prints, my body as a shield had written it cannot be activated during the damage step in its text. Since the newest release print for H.A.T format is one of those prints, we played with the text as written. In 2019, it got this part of the text removed, same as it was before 2012. Necrovalley is the card with most functional erratas. It has 7 of them, I believe. Some cards had more text changes, but their effects weren't really changed due to that. Necrovalley is not one of those cards. It's actually quite hard to know what Necrovalley does in each format you want to play, and even when you are playing with or against it, you must take a minute or two to find the relevant print for the time period you are playing your retro format in. In H.A.T format, there are actually only 2 effects that are different from current Necrovalley, and one of them is irrelevant. Firstly, on current Necrovalley, it says no card can move another card from graveyard to a different place. meaning Necrogardna, Artifacts, Black Spider Zombie, Destiny Hero Malicious, Rainbow Kuribo, and many more can't use their effects. In H.A.T format they still could. The other part that was added to most recent print is one that prevents changing types and attributes of monsters in the graveyard, such as Element Saber monsters' effects. In H.A.T format, there are no cards that can do something like this, so this sentence is irrelevant. Knight Assailant errata was also made public, although it wasn't a big one. If you had another Knight Assailant in your graveyard when one was discarded, you could add the first one back to hand, forming a possible loop. Now this is not possible anymore. Number C107, Neo Galaxy Ice Tachyon Dragon, although not being played in anything in H.A.T format, was really strong but got nerfed. When you got to summon him in some way, and you used its effect, then your opponent could not use cards like Necrogardna in graveyard to protect themselves. It prevented everything everywhere from activating. Now it only prevents activation that happen on the opponent's side of the field. When you are playing against Norlera's Turbo in H.A.T format, you can still make use of Ragna Zero and, for example, Overworked, because Phantom of Chaos's effect makes his current attack become that of copied attack, but his original attack is still 0. Afterwards, it was changed that its original attack gets changed rather. Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon was one of those nerfs that was arguably done properly, as it didn't kill the card, but it still prevented the possibility to loop its effect. Now Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon can use its Ignition effect once per turn for every copy you have. Also, you can only special summon one Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon using its summoning effect per turn. In H.A.T format, you could summon as many as you wanted, and for each you could use their effects once per turn. Royal Commands effect. Discussion gathered a lot of discussion when shadows were released in Duel Links Alliance format. With its latest print in December of 2014, it was clearly stated that all effects of flip effect monsters were negated by it, not just the flip parts. In H.A.T format, that wasn't the case, so when, for example, Slate Warrior died in battle, you could still use its second part of the effect when Royal Command was being active. Maybe just before mentioned Knight Assailants re-adding effect would be a better example, but yeah, that would still work in H.A.T format under Royal Command. Ruin, Queen of Oblivion, was ruled the same way Lord British Space Fighter was, and it could clear entire boards of monsters until it was elaborated that wasn't how it was meant to work. In H.A.T format, Ryko only sees play in Lightsworn decks as side decks, but its effect is still somewhat important because in 2014 and prior, it missed timing of Gigant and Firehand, for example. It also targeted in comparison to now when it does not. Now both of its effect, although one optional and the other mandatory, happen simultaneously. Scrap Dragon and Scrap Twin Dragon of Possession fame. In H.A.T format, if you take control of Scrap Dragon and then it gets destroyed by your opponent, it could still activate its mandatory graveyard effect. If a set artifact gets destroyed this way along with it, you can chain block artifact summon so it can't get solemn warninged. In current, Scrap Dragon wouldn't be able to activate if it's not destroyed while in your possession. Same goes for Scrap Twin Dragon. Shape Sister is an interesting one, as it was firstly printed as only being able to be special summoned in defense position, Just 1 year later, in August 2014, it was silently corrected to be able to special summon in attack position as well. Strike Ninja was one of first once per turn effects, but in 2018 it received an errata which made you able to only use one Strike Ninja's effect once per turn. Until then, if you had multiple Strike Ninjas, each one could activate their once per turn effect in the same turn, once each of course. Another very small one is Super Ancient Deep Sea King Coelacanth, who, like My Body as a Shield, was firstly correctly written, then wrongly, and then they corrected him again. Only in Battle Pack Tournament Prize Cards pack, Super Ancient Deep Sea King Coelacanth could negate the activation of a card it was targeted by tributing another fish-type monster. Before and after that, Coelacanth only negated the effect of that card. Swap Frog might be a hard one to comprehend, but essentially the difference is as follows. In Current, you can only return Swap Frog once to hand as cost to gain an additional normal summon of one frog monster. In H.A.T format, and until then, you could return him once more than once, although you were still only able to gain a said additional normal summon once. If your opponent uses something like Exchange to add the Grand Spellbook Tower to their hand, then either sets or activates it and destroys it. When it hits the graveyard in H.A.T format, you still get to special summon one spellcaster from your deck. At the end of 2015, it was changed that no longer applies and it would have to be destroyed whilst in your possession, same as with Grandmaster of the Six Samurai, Necomane King, Minefieldriller, Power Breaker, the Big Saturn, Scrap Dragons, Wat Lemur, and others. Some got their errata soon after the possession text changes, some much later. Treeborn Frog is exactly the same as Destiny and Dragoon, and you can only use it once per turn for the same copy. In both cases, so before and after errata, you can still summon Treeborn Frog, use something like Enemy Controller to tribute it and take control of your opponent's monster in the same standby phase, and then summon same Treeborn Frog once again. That Treeborn Frog is not recognized as the same card, so that works. Ultimate Tyranno is also an interesting one. In H.A.T format, it was ruled that if you have two Ultimate Tyrannos face up on your side of the field, neither can attack, since it was mandatory for each copy to attack everything and also attack first. They corrected this somewhat illogical text to it being optional to attack, not mandatory. Also, if you had two copies, you could still choose which Ultimate Tyranno attacks first and what it attacks. For the end, we have three more Union monsters: W Wing Catapult, Y Dragon Head, and Z Metal Tank, all of which got their restrictions removed, same as before mentioned for other Union monsters. They can now get unequipped and special summoned in any face-up position, and one monster can have multiple Union monsters equipped to it. There might be some other cards we didn't yet find out, so we might make another video if enough get discovered, or if Konami will make more errata in the future. I also have a video of banned cards that got their errata, since they are still part of the format, in case someone wants to play a game or tournament with one forbidden card allowed or something like this. I really don't want to make this video too long, so I'll cover those in another video. For the end, I have a Morphtronic Accelerator who got its errata, but it wasn't yet reprinted as of me making this video. Now you are restricted to only returning one Morphtronic monster from your hand to the deck rather than one Morphtronic card to destroy one card on the field and draw one card. In H.A.T format, you could still return a spell and trap card as well. Out of 5 normal monsters who got their flavored text changed, Necrovalley number 1 is the only one who still had their old text in H.A.T format, as it's also the only one without a reprint since its first and only print back in 2005. Maxx C was thought to have been a functional errata, but we found out no records of it actually being ruled that way, that it can only be used once per turn. If we would go strictly by its text, you couldn't really use Maxx C's effect and then revive him with something like Soul Charge or even normal summon him. It has been decided that this was simply a poor wording choice, although it is rather bizarre that they printed him first with "you can only activate Maxx C once per turn", then they printed him 5 times with "you can only use one Maxx C per turn", and then back again with the first wording. Madolcha monsters who were printed before Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy didn't have Madolchas if this card in your possession is destroyed, but rather when this card you control is destroyed. Firstly, Madolcha monsters were played as written in their card text, but upon the release of other Madolchas in the later sets, it's been established they're all poorly written and all trigger when solemn warning is used on them, for example. Hence, the current effect text also applies for H.A.T format. That's all for me. I hope this video is helpful and may your set Gear Gigants float into Gyanos when Dark Hole is used. Bye.